which were dissected, the number of mean lymph node dissected was 7. And always internal memory irradiation was used. And the chemotherapy that was used was CMF. And even in the British Columbia trial, the median nodes that were sampled were 11. So there was this international collaboration, EBCTCG, for doing meta-analysis on the randomized trials of carcinoma breast. So they thought of generating this meta-analysis and also updating it. So lot of the clinical practice guidelines and consensus is based on these EBC-TCG meta-analysis. This organization came into picture in around 1985, and the first meta-analysis was published, and it showed that that in 1995 it showed that giving post-mastectomy radiotherapy reduced the local recurrence to about half. Following it, another was published in 2000, which showed that there was a improvement in locoregional control with regional nodal irradiation. This meta-analysis published in 2005, it brought a very important concept to picture, and they said that with adequate local treatment, that is with adequate radiotherapy after MRM, at 5 years, if we are able to prevent 4 local recurrences, then it will translate into preventing 1 breast cancer death at 15 years. Now, this is very important because we are not giving radiotherapy only to decrease loco-regional recurrence. Giving post-mastectomy radiotherapy has translated into overall survival benefit, as has been seen in this EBCTCG meta-analysis. So there was an update, and this was the 5th publication by EBCTCG. There was an update in 2014, wherein they looked at women with 4 or more positive nodes and women with 1 to 3 positive nodes, and it was seen that there was proportionally similar benefit in decrease of locoregional recurrence and absolutely similar benefit in overall survival in both women with 4 or more nodes positive or 1 to 3 positive nodes. And in this study, they said that even for 1.5 locoregional recurrences, if they can be decreased at 10 years, it translates into prevention of 1 breast cancer related death at 15 years. So after the Danish studies, the British Columbia PMRT trial, and the EBCTCG meta-analysis, we know that the indications of adjuvant radiotherapy are in all cases of BCS, but in this presentation, in this class, we are going to talk about MRM. So in cases of MRM, where even 1 node is positive and advanced primary, that is T3 disease or T4 disease, adjuvant radiotherapy is indicated. So, but the next question is, do we need to treat the breast or the chest wall alone, or do we need to treat the SCF, entire axilla, or internal memory? So how far should we go? So now the indications of adjuvant regional nodal irradiations. Again, the EBCTCG meta-analysis and randomized studies, they provided valuable data for some clinical practice guidelines and consensus by expert panels. These were national and international expert panels, the American College of Radiology guide, the NICE guidelines, the NCC, and the DEGRO. And there was a clear consensus that for more than 4 positive lymph nodes after axillary dissection, there is level 1 evidence for going ahead with regional nodal irradiation. For advanced primary again, there was a consensus for inflammatory breast disease. There was a consensus for regional nodal irradiation. However, for 1 to 3 positive nodes, uh, although the EBCD 2014 did show the similar local regional control and survival benefit. However, the other guidelines say that there has to be individual consideration of high risk factors such as LVI, positive LVI, high grade, younger age of the patient, less than 10 nodes examined, or more than 20% of the positive nodes of the resected nodes, and a close margin. Um, However, based on the MA20 and the EORTC 22922 studies, which I will show, again, one or more involved nodes were irradiated for regional nodal irradiation also. So indications of radiotherapy to the axillary apex. So when I will be coming to the field of radiotherapy, then we know that the medial supraclavicular is treated, and with the tangents and the medial supraclavicular, the entire level 1 axilla, portion of level 2 axilla is included in the tangent, and level 3 are covered in the SCF field. So do we need to go ahead and treat the entire axilla? So modifications can be done in tangential and the SCF field to cover the entire axilla. And the cases where we would like to do so are when there is extensive extracapsular extension in the nodes which are positive, or if it's an inadequate dissection of, or if it is an SLNB positive sentinel node where no dissection has been done. So if dissection is not there, or if it is inadequate, or if it is an extensive extracapsular extension, we would like to treat the entire axilla, um, besides the axillary nodes which are covered in the tangential and the axillary fields. Now, the area of most controversy is whether internal memory nodes should be treated or not. So, positive axillary nodes with central and medial lesions uh, are an indication for RT to internal memory nodes. Now, if there are sentinel nodes in internal memory or positive axillary sentinel nodes with drainage to internal memory, then they should be treated. However, routine and regular routine irradiation of internal memory should be done with caution and careful consideration of risk benefit to increased cardiopulmonary exposure. Now, to answer this question, there were these studies, the MA20, EORTC 2299, and the French internal memory IMN study. And so, although these studies were comparing, uh, they were all treating internal memory nodes in their experimental arm. They were not able to answer this question. Why? Because in the MA20, in the control arm, they treated only the whole breast. And in the experimental arm, the whole breast, along with internal memory, along with medial supraclavicular field was treated. So it could not answer the question whether the benefit in local regional control and overall survival was due to the medial supraclavicular field or the internal memory. Similarly, in the EORTC trial, the control arm had standard tangents taking care of either the breast or the chest wall because they had mastectomy cases also. And the experimental arm had medial supraclavicular and internal memory. So which fields were, which specific nodal basin was responsible for the improvement in disease-free survival and recurrence-free survival? It was not possible to decipher. Another trial, the French trial, could have answered this question because in their control arm, the chest wall and medial supraclavicular were treated, and in the experimental, the medial supraclavicular and the internal memory were treated. However, the trial design was a bit limited, and they thought that with only RT to the chest wall, the recurrence would be to the tune of 10% at 5 years, which is very high, as we know that the local recurrence is to the tune of 5%. So this French trial was underpowered. Also, the radiotherapy technique that they used were 2D-RT. So we are still left with need to look at other factors when we decide whether the internal memory should be treated or not. The St. Gallen's consensus was there. There was a clear consensus on 1 to 3 nodes with adverse features such as TNBC for PMRT and regional nodal radiation, and PT2N0 with bad features. And also, if there were 1 to 2 positive nodes but no axillary dissection, the panel said that PMRT plus RNI should be done. But there was no consensus regarding PT3N0, and uh, the low risk, that the good risk 1 to 3 nodes positive, that is those which had ER positive or HER2 new positive. The NCCN guidelines, here we as I mentioned earlier, there is level 1 evidence. The level of evidence is category 1 for more than 4 positive axillary nodes. For all other, the level of evidence is 2A. And an important thing that I would like to mention here especially is, according to NCCN guidelines, if there is a negative axillary node and tumor is less than 5 centimeter, that is T2N0 disease, and margins are negative but they are less than 1 mm, so they say one should consider radiotherapy to chest wall. However, if the margins are more than 1 millimeter and it is T2N0 disease, one can leave the patient without adjuvant radiotherapy. So the margins are also considered in this NCCN guidelines. Now, some studies might answer this question about use of post-operative radiotherapy after mastectomy in intermediate risk stage 2 disease, that is Supremo trial and the Taylor-RT trial. The results are still awaited. So coming to now the technique of radiotherapy, we know the first step of planning radiotherapy is a simulation. So CT simulation for breast radiotherapy is done when his patient is positioned supine with both arms symmetrically abducted on a breast board or a wing board. Here I am showing both the positions. So I would like to mention here that breast board and wing board are positioning devices. Frequently in exams, students say that they are immobilization devices. They are not immobilization devices. They are positioning devices. And on a breast board, because there is an inclined plane, and on a wing board there is no inclination. So on a breast board, the chest wall, it becomes parallel to the plane. Otherwise there's a sloping chest wall. So the slice thickness is usually 5 mm. However, if we are going to delineate as per the ISRO guidelines, we need to have a free breathing scan from mid neck to upper abdomen with a slice thickness of 2 mm, and IV contrast needs to be administered. And we have placed a radio opaque wire at the mid axillary line, 2 centimeter below the opposite breast, and on the scar also. This will help us in delineating the chest wall on the axial cuts of CT scan. And another important thing I would like to mention here is that according to ISRO guidelines, while delineating the chest wall, one has to place a bolus of 2 centimeter above and below the scar on the chest wall. Because as per the ISRO guidelines, the chest wall becomes very thin otherwise. So we'll come to that in some time. Advantages of a breastboard: it's a carbon fiber, low attenuation, and comfortably arms, wrist, and head and shoulder can be placed. Chest wall surface becomes horizontal and arms are out of the lateral beams. A wing board is also suitable. It is a simpler positioning device. Now, a wing board is more suitable for a CT simulation where the bore of the gantry is narrow. The narrow bore of gantry means less than 75 centimeter, because with both arms abducted, then it can enter the CT gantry easily. But the slope cannot be corrected. That is the downside. However, with the newer techniques, we have other methods of correction of the slope. So I will show you that we can rotate the collimators, or we can use the multi-leaf collimators to make the posterior head of tangential beam follow the chest contour. So in this, we can see that while the patient is lying flat, not on an inclined plane, when we are giving tangentials, a lot of lung is being irradiated along with the breast tissue. However, if we collimate the tangential beam, we can take care of the extra lung tissue being irradiated. Now, the problem is that when we collimate the tangential beams and we are also treating the supraclavicular, then there are hot or cold spots underneath. And to take care of this, if we make the chest, if we make the patient lie down on an inclined plane, this can be eliminated. This a problem of hot or cold spots can be taken care of to some extent. So coming to the conventional field borders for tangential fields, it is the second intercostal space, the upper for the tangent, if when supraclavicular field is used, otherwise the head of clavicle. Medial is at or 1 centimeter away from midline, lateral is at mid-axillary line, and lower border is 2 centimeter below the inframammary fold. For supraclavicular field, upper border is at thyrocricoid groove, medial is at or 1 centimeter across midline, lateral is medial to the humeral head. Now, this is important to note that the humeral head has been shielded, and lower is just below the clavicular head. We often have to angulate the anterior SCF field 10 to 15 degrees laterally to avoid the dose to the cervical spine. And the dose is calculated at a depth of 3 centimeters. So what happens if the separation of the patient is higher? Now this posterior axillary boost field I'm showing here because in the era of when we did not have, we most of the centers had only a cobalt and did not have the availability of 10 MV or higher beams. So for an adequate coverage of the axillary nodes, a posterior axillary boost field was applied. So often the examiners might ask about why, whether you've heard of this posterior axillary boost field. However, it is not usually required when you're treating on a LINAC with the availability of the higher energy beams. Now the textbooks have started cutting down on information on these fields because they assume that all these centers have evolved. So but we need to know about them because in the exam there might be a question whether we know of this, and till date many centers are working with the cobalt. So if we are not going to treat the supraclavicular, say if it is a T2N0 disease, then the tangent, the upper border of the tangent can be a bit higher so that all the level 2 nodes can be covered. Coming to the internal mammary field, the techniques used can be a wider tangent field or a direct anterior field matched to the tangents. So a wider tangent, otherwise the tangential field are at the midline or 1 centimeter lateral to it. But when we are going to give those to the internal mammary, the medial border is moved 2 to 5 centimeter across midline, and in that case there has to be adequate blocking, or MLCs have to be used for decreasing the lung and the heart exposure. So which intercostal spaces are irradiated? First 3 intercostal spaces are considered to be the most significant for internal mammary nodes. The first 3 intercostal spaces. And when a separate internal mammary field is used, then the medial border is at midline and the lateral border is 5 to 6 centimeters from the midline. and inferiorly it is superiorly it is the inferior border of supraclavicular, and inferior is uh, uh, for the first three intercostal spaces, that is the superior border of the fourth intercostal space, and the depth is around 4 to 5 centimeter. So in most centers now, monoisocentric three-field breast technique is being used, in which we use asymmetric collimators or half beam block to treat the tangentials and the supraclavicular. So where is the isocenter? This is the isocenter, and when we are treating the supraclavicular field, the lower half of the beam is blocked, or it is if it is asymmetric collimator, this part is not opened and only the upper part is being treated, and then we rotate the gantry to treat the tangent, and we close the superior part of the beam and only the lower part is open and the tangents are treated. So this monocentric three-field breast technique with asymmetric collimators or half beam block is most commonly used for conventional or 3D CRT. So why should we be contouring for carcinoma breast? Now, this is for increasing the target dose coverage and homogeneity within the CTE, and to minimize the dose to the organs at risk. But we have to keep in mind that when we were giving these standard radiotherapy fields, as I've been showing in the past slides, there was a very low risk of locoregional recurrence. And it is important that we do not go on to treat a very large volume, because otherwise there will be uh, a detriment to the uh, there will be higher dose to the organs at risk. So the guidelines that are available for delineation of CTV, in which there is a large inter and intra-observer variation, are the RTOG guidelines in 2009, Danish were in 2013, the ESTRO breast contouring guidelines in 2015, and the radiation comparison, the trial version of RTOG, wherein they are comparing photon and proton radiotherapy. Now, of these, the RTOG and ESTRO are most widely used. So I now come to, I now try to compare the RTOG and ESTRO guidelines, so that we know that which ones to use in which scenario. Now, the ESTRO guidelines are not intended for locally advanced disease, and they are vessel-based contouring guidelines, whereas the RTOG guidelines are anatomy-based. In ESTRO, the axillary nodes are level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the interpectoral or rotor nodes are also there, and internal memory nodes. While in the RTOG, it is level 1, level 2, level 3, and supraclavicle nodes and internal memory nodes. So coming to the comparison of the two guidelines, that is the RTOG and the ESTRO, the chest wall, as per the RTOG guidelines, should be from the caudal border of the clavicle head, and it should be up to the skin. However, as per the ESTRO, the chest wall is 5 mm under the skin surface. And also the posterior limit of the chest wall, as per the RTOG, should be at the rib pleural interface. Whereas in the ESTRO, one has to stop short at major pectoral muscle. So as I mentioned, that because of this reason, the volume of chest wall as per the ESTRO guidelines, as can be seen in yellow, it becomes very thin as compared to the RTOG. So RTOG says that we have to go up to the skin and up to the rib pleural interface, but ESTRO says that we have to stop short within 5 mm of the skin and up to the pec major muscle. So it becomes very thin. So they suggest that one should place a 5 mm bolus at the time of CT simulation over the scar. Coming to level 1 axilla, while the RTOG takes into account the axillary vessels crossing the lateral edge of pec minor, the ESTRO guidelines, they take into account the axillary vein. Now, as shown earlier in the schematic diagram, the axillary artery and axillary vein, the axillary vein lies lower to the axillary artery. And if we see the level 1 axilla as per the RTOG and as per the ESTRO guideline, not much difference in the volumes. Coming to level 2, in level 2, the axillary artery is considered as the guiding structure. And in RTOG guidelines, it is the axillary vessels crossing the medial edge of pec minor. Comparison of the volume of level 2 axillary as per the RTOG and the ESTRO. There is some difference in the depth of uh, level 2 axillary, because in the level 2, the posterior is up to the rib and intercostal muscle, and for ESTRO, it is up to 5 mm dorsal to axillary vein. So, and also the lower, the RTOG, the lower extent is also more for RTOG, because they say the insertion of pec minor into the ribs. So the volume is a bit higher on the lower side. Axillary level 3, I will just show that in this we have to take into account the subclavian vein for the ESTRO, and the subclavian vein, as I mentioned, goes on to become the axillary artery when the first rib crosses it. So subclavian vein for the ESTRO guidelines, and this is the RTOG level 3. Now, major difference between the two guidelines, the volumes that are seen are in the supraclavicular nodes, because cranially in the RTOG, the supraclavicular nodes are up to the cricoid. And however, in the ESTRO guidelines, it is up to the cranial extent of the subclavian artery. So we can see in this that while the RTOG guidelines, if we use to delineate the supraclavicular node, it is much higher as compared to the supraclavicular node, which we delineate using the subclavian artery as per the ESTRO guidelines. So this is one area where there is major difference between the two guidelines. Again, showing the RTOG and the ESTRO level 1, level 2, level 3, and the supraclavicular nodes. Internal memory, now the RTOG guidelines, they use the first rib and the cranial aspect of fourth rib. The craniocaudal extent is similar in ESTRO. Only thing is that the ESTRO suggests that one should take a margin around the 5 mm margin around the internal memory vein. And the lateral and medial margin has not been mentioned in the RTOG guidelines. So internal memory nodes as per the RTOG guidelines, and internal memory nodes as per the ESTRO guidelines. So we have to take a 5 mm margin around the internal memory veins. So now which guidelines to use? RTOG, ESTRO, they are most commonly used, or RADCOMP are emerging. So we have to know that where there is major difference. Major difference is in the craniocaudal extent of SCF and volume, and we have to axillary vessels are crossing pec minor has been used as by RTOG for axillary level 1, in which identifying this area, it is difficult, and there is more inter-observer variation. Now, patterns of failure, which for validation of these guidelines, we need to have pattern of failure studies, which are there, but they are all retrospective, and we'll come to that in some time. In our department, we try to target volume delineation as per RTOG as a thesis protocol of one of our residents, and we could see that with conventional treatment fields, they were not adequately covered, these RTOG based lymph node delineation. But when 3D CRT planning was done with an intention to cover them, then there was a better coverage. And however, there was an increase in dose to the OARs, that which was not significant otherwise. So we need to at least follow some guidelines to know that what proportion of lymph node that we have delineated are being covered. Now, the pattern of failure studies that I mentioned, one is this study. In this, they have, it's a retrospective study, and they have looked at the 337 recurrences which were outside the estro or astro CTV. Now, level 4 failures around 9% occurred outside estro CTV, which is obvious because estro CTV level 4 is much lower than the RTOG level 4 CTV, RTOG SCF. And also 20% occurred posterolateral to the anterior scalene muscles. This is for locally advanced tumors. And then this is another pattern of failure study, which was done using the PET scans in cases where there were nodal mets. Now, this paper published in the Red Journal compared the nodal volumes according to RTOG, ESTRO, and RADCOM guidelines, and they try to find clinical situations where a particular guideline should be used. So they have they have collected all the data by doing a literature search on the studies which have looked at the patterns of failure, and they have then compared. In this paper, they also show the comparison of the RTOG, ESTRO, and RADCOMP delineated CTVs, and taking into consideration the available pattern of failure studies, this paper suggests that, this review suggests that if it's an early disease, for example, if it's biopsy for an early breast where B has been, or get away with ESTRO guidelines, because in ESTRO the CTV volume is limited. However, if there is a higher regional risk, larger primary and or nodal positivity, or even early disease with triple negative or young age, poor response to neoadjuvant chemo, then perhaps more large volumes, as can be drawn by RTOG or RADCOMP, have to be used. And if there is a gross SCF positive, if there are internal memory nodal mets, then we have to extend the cranial border higher than the cricoid cartilage also. And if the internal memory nodes are positive, then perhaps instead of only the first 3 intercostal spaces, we have to go lower down. So what are the sequelae of radiation in carcinoma breast? Radiotherapy, it is dermatitis, fatigue, and hyperpigmentation and pneumonitis as acute effects. Late effects are fibrosis, telangiectasia, pulmonary fibrosis, lymphedema, precocious cardiovascular disease, and second malignancy. Now, pulmonary sequelae, there is always a radiological change after radiation of carcinoma breast, but clinical pneumonitis is rarely seen. It is 0.2% after whole breast irradiation, 1.2% after comprehensive radiotherapy, nodal radiation. In cardiac sequelae, one must remember that Darby et al. Showed that the risk of ischemic heart disease are proportional to mean heart dose, and around 7.4% every 1 gray increase in mean heart dose is the increase. It increases linearly, and the risk begins at 1 to 2 and continues up to more than 20 years. So mean heart dose should be limited, and other cardiac risk factors should also be managed. Dose and fractionation, conventionally 50 to 50 grain 25 fraction, but with hypofractionation there were a few patients with chest wall also, and 40 grain 16 fractions. Use of boost to mastectomy scar, now the value of it is controversial. And if decision is made, if the skin was positive, then it is additional 10 gray at the rate of 2 gray per fraction. Bolus, again, it increases the dose to the skin, but and thus the skin toxicity, and its contribution to improve the local control is not really known. Now, coming to whether after delineation of these volumes, should we be giving forward IMRT or inverse IMRT? Now, with 3D CRT and field segmentation techniques, that is field in field, we can have a good dosimetry. Now, here I'm showing whole breast, but the similar can be situation with the chest wall also. Better cosmetic outcomes in BCS. It's a simple method, less MU, less scatter, and decreased planning time. So what is done in forward planned field in field technique? These are the tangents. First, there is an open tangent. And we look at the area where there is a high dose. Then we have another sub-tangent with similar angle and same dimension. But in this subtangent, the area of high dose is now shielded. So 90% of the total dose is given by open tangents and 10% of the dose is given by the subtangents. So this is called field in field technique. And it provides us a better dose homogeneity within our CTV. Now, what are the advantages of inverse planning IMRT? Now, in a BCS case, a whole breast, it can be used for SIB IMRT. There are now studies which are looking at SIB IMRT, but that is not my mandate today. I have to talk about the post-mastectomy chest wall. So if there is bilateral breast where we have to give dose to bilateral chest wall, in this volumetric arc technique, we can do it in a better way with a lesser dose to the underlying lung and the heart. And but otherwise, an inverse plan in an IMRT, there is an increase in low dose areas to the normal structure, and the value of that has to be certain in terms of the risk and benefit ratio. Now, when we go ahead with IMRT, we need to take care of the breathing motion, which can be done by active breath control or gating. So what is active breath coordination or control in this? During simulation itself, the patient is trained for deep inspiration and holding her breath. And so we note down that for how long the patient is able to hold her breath. And if we can see, and that if it's a free breathing scan where the heart is closer to the breast, and in a scan with deep inspiration, breath hold, the heart is far removed from the breast. So this is a very good method of decreasing the dose to the heart. And suppose the patient is able to hold her breath in this position for 20 seconds, and the treatment is for the entire treatment takes 120 seconds. So 6 times during her treatment, the beam will be on. Only when she is able to hold her breath so that the heart is in this position, the beam will be turned on. So this is ABC for decreasing dose to the heart, and some form of decreasing dose to the heart has to be done if we are going ahead with IMRT to the breast. Now, treatment verification can be either virtually simulated, digitally reconstructed radiograph, or compared with EPID. If CBCT is present, CBCT can be done, cone beam CT can be done. If we do an electronic portal imaging, we take a look at the central lung distance, anterior flash, and the inferior flash. So to conclude, the validation of guidelines has only been by retrospective studies, and this is level 4 evidence. So, and also it is very difficult to validate these guidelines, whether when we are delineating it actually increases the local control without increasing the risk to the organs at risk, because the local because the regional nodal recurrence is very low. We would require a very large number of patients, and we would have to follow them up for a very long period of time before we can have validation of these guidelines. uh, but some guidelines should be used, and at least we should look into it, that how much are we able to cover the axillary and the supraclavicular nodes, so that in future we can reduce the intra-observer and inter-observer variations. For internal memory nodal irradiation, we need to personalize the treatment instead of compartmentalizing it. We should not either give it to everybody or give it to none, but we need to look into individual cases. So here I have a case scenario that I will mention, and I will ask you to think of whether you will not give radiation, you will give radiation only to the chest wall, you will give radiation to chest wall as well as SCF, you will consider treating the entire axilla, or you will consider treating the internal memory also. So, and I will let you know my opinion also. A 35-year-old lady, premenopausal, she underwent mastectomy with an appropriate axillary lymph node dissection. T size was 3.5 centimeter, LVI positive, margins clear, but less than 1 mm. She is otherwise N0, so she is T2 N0, but LVI positive, and she is TNBC. So would you like to give radiotherapy to her? Would you like to treat the SCF along with chest wall, or the chest wall alone? So in her case, she is young age, and she has a margin less than 1 mm. So as per the NCCN guidelines, the chest wall must be treated. But considering that she is TNBC and LVI positive, we might consider treating the medial supraclavicular nodes also. But the chest wall should at least be treated because the margin is less than 1 mm. Another case is of a 50-year-old lady whose postmenopausal has undergone MRM with adequate lymph node dissection. She is T2 N0 and ERPR positive and HER2 negative. So T2 N0, low risk. Will you consider giving radiation to her, to the chest wall or all the nodes? I think in her case, we can forego radiation, and she can be closely followed up. In the third scenario, a 47-year-old lady postmenopausal underwent MRM with adequate lymph node dissection, axillary lymph node dissection, which was adequate. The T size was 6 centimeter, that is T3. It was an upper inner quadrant disease. There were 5 nodes positive. She was N2 and she was TNBC. This scenario, I think, calls for irradiation of internal memory nodes as well. I wish to thank my departmental colleagues, my physics faculty, all my residents who inspire us and help us in carrying out these studies, the dosimetric study of 3D CRT covering the nodal volumes drawn by RTOG, and another dosimetric study that is undergoing, wherein we're looking at SIB IMRT feasibility. And special thanks to Dr. Avinash for helping me with the content for this presentation, and Dr. Prabha for sharing her thesis data. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rohini ma'am. It was really informative session, and I think it has cleared almost all the doubts in the PMRT target delineation. And I think it's really very, very beneficial for the students, as every aspect was taken care of, starting from the anatomy and then coming to the rationale and the role of RT in case of PMRT. And most important thing that ma'am has covered the 2D planning also, because now we are a little bit aware of 3D plannings, but we are not that much aware of 2D planning. So it was really informative for the students in this aspect. Ma'am has cleared all the doubts. So now coming to the next part of this session, I think we should start with the questions. So the first question is regarding the indications of SCF irradiation and axillary irradiation. And there is one more question with that, in case of if there is one positive lymph node, is SCF irradiation should be done or not?
Okay. So as per the EBCTCG 2014, published report, they say that even if there is one positive node, we should go ahead with irradiation of the medial supraclavicular nodes. And that is what we are following also. Now, the other question was whether the entire axilla needs to be treated. For that, we need to look at the histopathology report carefully. If it says that there was extracapsular extension also, then perhaps we need to treat the entire axilla. Treating entire axilla means that we stop short at medial medial to the head of the humerus. But if entire axilla is to be covered, we need to treat at least 1/3 of the humeral head also. I'll show you which area is actually that we should focus on. I'll try and show. Uh, okay. Okay. So, so okay. So in the SCF field that I've shown, this is the SCF field. Can you see? Hello. Is my
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's visible, ma'am. Yeah.
So when we are treating supraclavicular, we are blocking out the head of humerus. But when we are treating the entire axilla, we have to treat this part also, and 1/3 of the humeral head is also treated. And this needs to be done when there is extracapsular extension or the axilla